The sharp crack of an open palm against skin exploded through the diner like a rifle shot, freezing every conversation, every clink of silverware, every breath. Sheriff Harlan Briggs stood over the frail 72-year-old woman, rolling his thick shoulders and adjusting the heavy belt that carried his badge and gun. A smirk of pure, unchallenged power sat on his face. He believed he had just put another local in her place, reminding the entire town of Pine Hollow, Georgia, exactly who held the real authority. But as Clara Ellison wiped the blood from her split lip with the back of a trembling hand, the sheriff remained completely unaware of one fatal truth. Her only son was an active-duty Navy SEAL, and he was coming home. Pine Hollow was the kind of place where the July heat pressed down like a wet wool blanket, and secrets moved slowly over sweet tea and grease-stained menus. For decades, the town had stayed quiet, insulated from the rush of the outside world. Beneath its postcard pretty surface, however, lived a rigid hierarchy enforced not by the law of the land, but by the iron will of Sheriff Harlan Briggs. Briggs wore his badge the way other men wore crowns. Broad-shouldered, thick-necked, with pale blue eyes that never stopped hunting for the next excuse to dominate, he had ruled the county for 15 years with a brand of corrupt, racially charged policing that the higher-ups in Atlanta preferred not to notice. Speed traps aimed at certain drivers, warrantless searches, open intimidation. Those were just ordinary Tuesdays in Pine Hollow. At the absolute center of daily life sat a small, unassuming place called the Copper Kettle. It was the only restaurant in town where the coffee stayed strong, the pie was still made from scratch, and eventually everyone, no matter who they were, had to walk through its door. On a suffocating Wednesday morning, the diner was packed. The air conditioner fought a losing battle against the heat. In the corner booth, sipping black coffee and reading the local paper, sat Clara Ellison. She was 72, a retired middle school English teacher who had taught half the town how to read. Quiet dignity lived in every line of her. Silver hair pinned neatly back, posture still perfect, voice soft yet impossible to ignore. Clara had spent her whole life in this county. She had marched in the civil rights movement as a young woman, endured the long grind of desegregation, and later poured everything she had into the children of Pine Hollow. She was a widow. Her husband, a hard-working mechanic, had been gone 10 years. Her greatest pride was her only child, Nathan. Nathan had left town at 18, determined to see something larger than county lines. He hadn't merely joined the military. He had excelled. Through pure refusal to quit, he earned the Trident and became a special warfare operator in the United States Navy SEALs. He was currently attached to a Tier 1 unit out of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado in California, a fact Clara rarely mentioned but carried in her heart like armor. At 10:17 a.m., the bell above the heavy glass door rang hard. Conversation in the Copper Kettle dropped several degrees. Sheriff Harlan Briggs strode in flanked by 2 of his deputies, Travis Cole and Mason Reed. Briggs didn't enter a room. He occupied it. The door slammed behind him. His boots thudded across the checkered linoleum. He ignored the waiting customers and the hostess stand and made straight for the center of the diner. Briggs had a preferred table. It wasn't officially reserved, but locals knew better than to sit there. Today the place was unusually crowded. A skinny teenage busboy named Jordan Hale, whose family had only recently moved down from Texas, was trying to clear the table as fast as his arms would allow, stacking heavy plates and wiping sticky vinyl. "You're moving like molasses, boy," Briggs rumbled, voice cutting through the clatter of silverware. Jordan flinched and dropped a fork. It rang loudly against the floor. "I'm sorry, sir. Just give me 1 second." Briggs stepped forward and deliberately planted his heavy boot on top of the fork, trapping the boy's hand against the linoleum. Jordan gasped in pain. "I didn't ask for an apology." Briggs sneered, leaning down until his face was inches from the terrified teenager. "I asked why my table ain't clean. You people come into my town, take our jobs, and can't even wipe a damn table right." The diner went dead silent. Diane Porter, the waitress who had worked there 20 years, froze with a full pot of coffee in her hand. Patrons suddenly found their hash browns fascinating. Fear was a powerful silencer, except for Clara. She folded her newspaper with deliberate care, aligned the edges, and stood. She didn't storm across the floor. She moved with the quiet certainty of someone who had already decided what had to be done. "Sheriff Briggs." Her voice carried clear as a church bell. Briggs didn't look up at first. He kept his boot lightly pressed on the boy's hand. "Mind your business, Clara. I'm talking to the help." "Lift your foot, Harlan." She used the name she had called him when he was a sour 12-year-old in her 7th grade classroom. Briggs's neck flushed deep red. Slowly, he raised his boot. Jordan snatched his hand back, eyes wet, and scrambled toward the kitchen. Briggs rose to his full 6'2" and loomed over the 5'3" elderly woman. "You're overstepping, Clara," he warned, resting a hand aggressively on his utility belt right next to the service weapon. "I'm the law in this county. I suggest you sit back down and finish your coffee before I find a reason to cite you for disturbing the peace." Clara didn't blink. She looked at him with the profound disappointment of a teacher who realizes a former student is broken beyond repair. "There is no peace here to disturb, Harlan. Only fear. And stomping on a child who's just doing his job doesn't make you a big man. It only proves what everyone in this town already whispers behind your back, that you're nothing but a fragile bully with a tin badge." The words hung in the air, heavy and lethal. No one spoke to the sheriff that way. No one. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the refrigerator in the back seemed too loud. Deputies Cole and Reed shifted uneasily. They knew Briggs's temper. Striking a respected elderly woman in front of a room full of witnesses was a line even Pine Hollow usually hesitated to cross. Briggs's face twisted from embarrassment into a deep, mottled purple of pure rage. His ego, fragile as glass and swollen by years of unchecked power, had just been shattered in public. "You think you're untouchable because you're an old woman?" he hissed, stepping so close she could smell the stale tobacco and black coffee on his breath. "You think because you taught half these cowards how to spell that I won't lock you up for disrespecting an officer of the law? You can arrest me, Harlan," Clara answered evenly, chin high. "But you cannot demand respect while acting like a thug. Shut your mouth." "Or what?" she challenged softly. "Will you stomp on my hand too?" Something behind Briggs's eyes snapped. The rational part of his brain that still remembered cameras and witnesses evaporated, replaced by blinding fury. He drew his hand back. He didn't push her. He didn't shove her aside. He swung a thick, heavy backhand with everything he had. The sound was sickening, a sharp, violent crack that echoed off the tin ceiling. The force lifted Clara clean off her feet. She slammed into the edge of a nearby booth and crumpled to the hard linoleum. Her shoulder took the worst of the impact. Her head whipped back and struck the base of the table. A collective gasp rose, followed by screams. Diane dropped the coffee pot. It shattered, sending scalding liquid across the aisle. "Clara!" she cried, rushing forward. "Back off!" Briggs bellowed, hand dropping to the grip of his pistol. He drew it just an inch from the holster, a clear threat that froze Diane in place. He glared at the horrified crowd, chest heaving. "Anyone else want to interfere with police business? Anyone?" No one moved. A few men at the counter clenched white-knuckled fists, but the sight of the two deputies resting hands on their own weapons kept them rooted. They were hostages in their own town. On the floor, Clara groaned. Her vision swam. A sharp metallic taste filled her mouth. Warm blood trickled down her chin from where her teeth had cut the inside of her lip. Her left shoulder throbbed with sickening intensity. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up on one arm. She didn't ask for help. She didn't cry out. She simply wiped the blood from her chin with the back of a wrinkled hand, smearing crimson across pale skin. Briggs looked down at her, chest puffed out, though a flicker of realization about what he had just done danced briefly in his eyes. He crushed it and doubled down. "Next time I tell you to mind your business, you keep your eyes on your damn newspaper. You hear me, old woman?" Clara didn't answer. She didn't look at him. She gathered her purse from where it had fallen, used the booth to pull herself upright, and with every ounce of remaining strength, walked out of the copper kettle, back straight, head high, leaving a stunned, terrified silence in her wake. What Sheriff Harlan Briggs never noticed was the 17-year-old girl sitting in the booth directly behind the altercation. Her name was Mia Caldwell. Her phone had been propped against a napkin dispenser, camera lens perfectly framed. Mia hadn't just recorded the slap. She had recorded the argument, the threat, the brutal assault, and Briggs drawing his weapon on the waitress. Her hands shook violently as she hit stop. She knew if Briggs caught her with that footage, she would disappear. The moment Briggs turned to bark orders at his deputies, Mia slipped out the side emergency exit and ran all the way home carrying the most explosive piece of evidence Pine Hollow had ever seen. 3,000 miles away, in the sun-drenched high-security compound of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, Chief Petty Officer Nathan Ellison was running his men through close-quarters combat drills. Nathan was a ghost of a man, 6'3", built like a brick wall, dark, intense eyes that missed nothing. He had spent the last 12 years operating in the most unforgiving corners of the globe. Ambush in the mountains of Afghanistan, direct action raids in the dead of night in Syria, environments that broke ordinary men in half. He was highly decorated, a silver star and 2 Purple Hearts locked away in a drawer. To his teammates, he was a tactical genius, a quiet professional who led from the front. Beneath the lethal exterior, though, Nathan was a deeply devoted son. Since his father's death, he had called Clara every Sunday without fail. He sent flowers on her birthday and coordinated local handymen from halfway around the world to keep her house in good repair. It was 14:12 Pacific when Nathan stepped off the training mat, sweat dripping, pulling off tactical gloves. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander James Foster, walked out onto the tarmac holding a ringing cell phone. His expression was grim. "Ellison," Foster called, voice cutting through distant range fire. "You need to take this. It's your neighbor back home. She says it's an emergency." Nathan's heart skipped. A call from Mrs. Evelyn Hart, the sweet older woman who lived next door to his mother, meant only one thing. He took the phone. "This is Nathan." "Nathan? Oh, Nathan, honey." Mrs. Hart's voice trembled, thick with tears. "It's your mama. You need to come home. What happened?" Nathan's voice dropped an octave, shifting from a son's concern to a soldier's cold focus. "Is she in the hospital? Did she fall?" "She didn't fall, Nathan," Mrs. Hart sobbed. "Sheriff Briggs. He assaulted her at the diner. He hit her so hard he knocked her to the ground. She's refusing to go to the hospital. She's locked in her house and she's bleeding and she won't let anyone but Dr. Shaw in. And Nathan, there's a video." The world around Nathan seemed to freeze. The roar of the Pacific, the shouting of recruits, the California heat. All of it vanished. "A video? It's everywhere," Mrs. Hart whispered. "A girl put it on the internet. The sheriff's deputies are already driving around town looking for her. Nathan, we're scared. The police here, they aren't going to do anything to him. They protect their own." "Mrs. Hart," Nathan said, voice terrifyingly calm. "Go to my mother's house. Lock the doors. Do not let anyone in unless it's Dr. Shaw. I will be there soon." He hung up. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. The fury that bloomed in his chest wasn't hot and chaotic. It was ice-cold, precise, and infinitely more dangerous. He pulled out his own phone and searched for Pine Hollow. It didn't take long. The algorithm had already seized the violent local video. The title read, "Corrupt Georgia Sheriff Assaults Elderly Woman." Nathan tapped the screen. He watched the grainy footage. He saw the sheriff intimidating the boy. He heard his mother's brave, steady voice. And then he saw it. The massive, heavy hand of Harlan Briggs striking the woman who had raised him, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. He watched her frail body slam into the wood of the booth and hit the floor. He replayed the slap once, twice, 3 times. Every viewing chipped away another piece of military restraint until only the raw, primal instinct of a protector remained. Lieutenant Commander Foster watched his chief petty officer. He had seen Nathan after firefights, after losing brothers in arms, but he had never seen the look that now possessed Nathan's face. It was the look of a man who had just declared war. "Ellison?" Foster asked carefully. "What's the situation?" Nathan turned the phone and played the video one final time. Foster watched in stunned silence, jaw tightening as Clara hit the floor. "That's my mother," Nathan said quietly. The stillness in his voice was terrifying. Foster looked from the screen to his best operator. "How much leave do you need?" "A week," Nathan replied, already unvelcroing his plate carrier and dropping it onto the bench. "Maybe more. Take what you need. Do you want me to make some calls?" I can get JAG involved. Contact the FBI field office in Atlanta. No, sir, Nathan interrupted, eyes locking on his commander. With all due respect, bureaucratic red tape takes months. That man is walking the streets with a badge and a gun, threatening the people who saw him do it. I'm going to handle this. Foster knew better than to argue. Keep it legal, Chief. Don't throw your career away for a piece of trash. I'm not going to break the law, sir, Nathan said, zipping his duffel with a sharp, violent tug. I'm just going to remind him that he isn't untouchable, and I'm going to make sure he never wears that badge again. Within 2 hours, Nathan was in a window seat on a commercial red-eye out of San Diego bound for Atlanta. He didn't sleep a wink during the 4-hour flight. He stared out into the pitch-black night, mind running tactical assessments, gathering intelligence, formulating a plan. Harlan Briggs had spent his entire life bullying people who couldn't fight back. He relied on fear, isolation, and a corrupted local system. He thought he was the apex predator in a very small pond. As the plane touched down on Georgia tarmac, bringing Nathan Ellison back to the soil of his hometown, Briggs was about to learn a devastating lesson. He hadn't merely struck an old woman. He had summoned something far more dangerous, and that something was finally home. The sun rose over Pine Hollow like a bleeding wound, casting long crimson shadows across empty streets. By 6:05 a.m., the humidity was already suffocating, trapping the scent of damp pine and red clay close to the earth. The town was choking, not only from the weather but from a profound, paralyzing dread. The video Mia Caldwell had recorded had gone viral overnight, racking up hundreds of thousands of views across the state. In response, Sheriff Briggs had placed Pine Hollow under an unspoken curfew. Cruisers crawled the streets, dark windows rolled up, a visible warning to anyone thinking of protest. Briggs's message was clear. I am still the king here. At the edge of town, a battered gray pickup pulled into the gravel driveway of a small white clapboard house. The porch light still burned, a lone beacon against the morning mist. Nathan Ellison stepped out. He wore a plain black t-shirt, worn jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. He carried no military duffel, only a small canvas bag. He stood by the driver's door for a long moment, inhaling the familiar scent of honeysuckle and red clay, letting his senses adapt. To anyone passing, he looked like a blue-collar worker coming off a graveyard shift. A trained eye would notice the absolute stillness of his posture, the way his gaze swept the perimeter. Tree line, neighboring windows, the solid deadbolts on his mother's house. He walked up the steps without a sound. Before he could knock, the door opened. Mrs. Evelyn Hart stood there, eyes red and puffy, clutching a dish towel. When she saw Nathan, her breath caught. She looked at the sheer size of him, the hardened muscle, the scars tracing his forearms, the cold, ancient look in his eyes, and she began to weep. "Oh, Nathan," she whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace. "He's been driving past the house all night. Mason was parked at the end of the road just an hour ago." "Where is she?" Nathan asked, voice low, a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "In the bedroom. Dr. Shaw came by and gave her something for the pain, but she wouldn't go to the clinic. She said if she left this house, Briggs would frame her for something or lock her up." Nathan patted Mrs. Hart's shoulder gently. "Go home, get some rest. I'm here now." He walked down the narrow carpeted hallway of his childhood home and stopped at the threshold of his mother's bedroom. Blinds drawn, the room lay in deep twilight. Clara lay in the center of the bed, her frail frame looking impossibly small beneath the quilt. The left side of her face was horribly swollen, a dark, sickening shade of purple and black stretching from cheekbone to jaw. Her lower lip was split, held together by a thin layer of dried blood. Her left arm rested in a makeshift sling across her chest. Nathan felt a cold, heavy weight drop into the pit of his stomach. In all his years of deployment, seeing the horrors of war, nothing had prepared him for the sight of his own mother broken by a coward. As if sensing his presence, Clara opened her right eye. A faint, painful smile touched her good lip. "Nathan," she rasped, voice thick. "Look at you. You've grown even bigger." He walked over and knelt beside the bed. He took her small, fragile hand in his massive palms. He didn't squeeze. He held it like glass. "Mom," he said softly. Don't do anything foolish, son, she whispered, fingers tightening feebly around his. Harlan is a powerful man in this county. He has the judges, the commissioners. They all look the other way. He wants a fight. He's looking for an excuse to destroy anyone who stands up to him. Nathan leaned down and kissed her forehead, careful of the bruised side of her face. I'm not going to do anything foolish, Mom. I'm going to do exactly what you taught me to do. I'm going to take out the trash. He stayed until the painkillers pulled her back under. Then he walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of tap water, sat at the old wooden table, and pulled out his phone. Nathan did not call the local police. He did not call the local media. He dialed a number that bypassed standard routing and terminated at a secure terminal inside the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division in Washington, D.C. The man who answered was Special Agent Cole Brennan, a former Marine who owed Nathan his life after a botched extraction in Erbil 5 years earlier. Ellison, Brennan said, voice instantly alert. I saw the video. Tell me you're not in Georgia. I'm in Georgia, Cole. Nathan, listen to me, Brennan warned, tone urgent. We've been building a case on Briggs for 18 months. Racketeering, extortion, civil rights violations, illegal firearms trafficking. We have a federal grand jury convening in Savannah next month. If you go in there and put him in the hospital, you'll blow the entire investigation. He'll play the victim and the whole system will protect him. He hit my mother, Cole, Nathan said. The lack of emotion in his voice was terrifying to Brennan. I know, man. God, I saw it. It makes me sick, but you have to let the process work. The process is too slow, Nathan replied. He's terrorizing a town. He's looking for the girl who filmed it right now. By next month, she'll be missing or dead in a county jail cell. I'm not going to wait. What are you going to do? Brennan asked, a note of panic creeping in. I'm going to accelerate your timeline, Nathan said. I'm going to give your grand jury everything they need, wrapped in a bow. But to do that, I need tactical intelligence. Send me everything you have on Briggs's off-the-books operations. The warehouses, the drop points, the bank accounts, everything. A long silence. Brennan knew he was risking his career. He also knew exactly what kind of man Nathan Ellison was. If Nathan wanted Briggs dead, Briggs would already be a corpse. The fact that Nathan was asking for data meant he was playing a high-stakes chess game. Check your encrypted folder in 10 minutes, Brennan sighed. And Nathan, if you get caught, I never heard of you. Understood. Nathan hung up. 10 minutes later, his tablet lit up. He began to read. He memorized the layout of the county, the shift schedules of the corrupt deputies, and the exact location of a secluded warehouse near the Ogeechee River, where Harlan Briggs stored confiscated narcotics and illegal firearms destined for the black market. Nathan closed the tablet. He stood, adjusted his cap, and walked out the door. The hunter had identified his prey. By noon, the atmosphere in Pine Hollow had grown downright volatile. Sheriff Harlan Briggs sat in his air-conditioned office at the county courthouse, boots propped on the oak desk. A half-empty bottle of bourbon sat next to a stack of paperwork. He was furious. The video would not die. The county commissioner had already called twice, panicked about state intervention and public relations disasters. Idiots, Briggs muttered, taking a swig. They didn't understand how this county worked. You didn't rule by being nice. You ruled by making people realize that crossing you meant total ruin. The door opened and Deputy Mason Reed rushed in, sweating, uniform stained at the armpits. Sheriff, we got a problem. Briggs didn't lower his feet. What is it, Mason? Did you find that little Mia yet? No, sir. Her house is empty. Her parents packed her up and sent her out of the county last night. But that ain't the problem. Clara Ellison's son is in town. Briggs paused. He slowly lowered his boots to the floor, brow furrowing. The kid who joined the Navy? What about him? He's just a sailor. What's he going to do? Write a letter to the governor? Sheriff, you don't understand, Mason said, voice cracking slightly. I saw him at the gas station down the road. He was just standing there pumping gas, but he looked at me, Sheriff. He didn't say a word. He just looked right through me. I ran his record on the state database. He ain't just a regular sailor. He's a Navy SEAL, Chief Petty Officer, Tier 1 operator. Briggs's eyes narrowed. For a brief second, a cold spike of adrenaline shot through his chest. He knew what a SEAL was. He knew what they were capable of. But his bloated ego quickly reasserted itself. This was his county. He had 10 armed men, the law on his side, and an entire armory at his disposal. "I don't care if he's the president's personal bodyguard," Briggs snarled, slamming a fist on the desk. "He's one man in my jurisdiction. He's a civilian. If he steps 1 foot out of line, if he even looks at you wrong, you lock him up for intimidating an officer. You hear me? We don't back down in Pine Hollow." "Yes, sir," Mason said, though he didn't look convinced. Meanwhile, Nathan was already executing Phase 1. He didn't go to the courthouse. He didn't confront Briggs. Instead, he went to the local hardware store owned by an elderly man named Frank Thornton, a close friend of Nathan's late father. The store was empty when Nathan entered. The bell jingled and Frank looked up from behind the counter, eyes widening. "Nathan?" Frank gasped, coming around to shake his hand. "Son, I heard what happened to your mama. We are so sorry. We wanted to do something, but Briggs—" "I know, Mr. Thornton," Nathan said, voice calm, reassuring. "I don't blame anyone, but I need your help. I need to borrow some equipment and use your back room for a couple of hours." "Anything you need, son, anything." Nathan didn't buy weapons. He didn't need them. He had brought specialized gear in his canvas bag. Instead, he gathered high-intensity trail cameras, heavy-duty zip ties, a commercial-grade signal jammer, and several rolls of black duct tape. For the next 3 hours, he sat in the dark back room of the hardware store reviewing the federal file Brennan had sent. Harlan Briggs wasn't merely a bully. He was the head of a massive criminal enterprise. Every Friday night at midnight, Briggs and his inner circle, deputies Travis Cole and Mason Reed, met with a regional drug distributor at the abandoned Ogeechee River warehouse. They traded confiscated meth and unregistered firearms for hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, which Briggs laundered through a series of shell companies. Tonight was Friday. Nathan mapped the warehouse layout using satellite imagery. Classic funnel design. 1 main entrance, 2 side fire exits, an old loading dock. Perfect for an ambush. At 11:05 p.m., the storm that had threatened all day finally broke. Thunder cracked across the night sky, and a torrential downpour began to lash the county, turning dirt roads into thick, treacherous mud. The rain was a gift. It washed away thermal signatures, muffled sound, and reduced visibility to near zero. Nathan dressed in full black tactical gear, face obscured by a dark balaclava. He slipped out of his mother's house through the woods, completely bypassing the deputy car parked a quarter-mile down the road. He moved through the forest like a shadow, invisible in the darkness. He reached the Ogeechee River warehouse by 11:48 p.m. The massive rusted tin structure loomed out of the dark, surrounded by overgrown weeds and broken concrete. Nathan scaled a rusted fire escape with effortless agility, found a broken window near the roofline, and slipped inside, dropping onto a steel catwalk 15 feet above the concrete floor. He activated the signal jammer. Instantly, all cellular service and police radio frequencies within a 1-mile radius went dead. At exactly midnight, headlights pierced the heavy rain outside. 2 vehicles pulled into the warehouse. Sheriff Briggs's black police SUV and a luxury silver sedan belonging to the drug distributor, a notorious criminal named Victor Morales. The heavy sliding doors opened and the vehicles drove inside, engines idling before being shut off. Briggs stepped out of his SUV, flanked by Travis and Mason. Morales climbed from the sedan, accompanied by 2 heavily armed bodyguards carrying submachine guns. "You're late, Victor," Briggs barked, wiping rain from his face. "And my radio is acting up. The whole system is down." "It's the storm, Sheriff," Morales replied, gesturing to a bodyguard who pulled a heavy duffel from the trunk. "Let's make this quick. I don't like being in this county any longer than I have to." Briggs nodded to Deputy Travis, who brought out a large plastic crate filled with bricks of high-grade methamphetamine and several dozen unregistered automatic rifles, evidence that had officially been logged as destroyed in the county database months earlier. Up on the catwalk, Nathan watched the entire exchange through a high-definition night vision camera. The digital recorder rolled, capturing every face, every word, every exchange of illegal contraband and stacks of cash. It was the definitive nail in Harlan Briggs's coffin. The federal case was complete, but Nathan wasn't finished. The law would take Briggs's badge and his freedom. Nathan was going to take something more personal. With a silent, deliberate movement, He detached a small flashbang from his vest. He pulled the pin, counted to 2, and dropped it directly into the center of the gathering below. Boom! A blinding flash of white light and a deafening localized explosion shattered the warehouse. The criminals screamed, instantly disoriented, clutching ears and eyes as the pressure waves scrambled their nervous systems. Morales' bodyguards began firing blindly into the dark, weapon flashes illuminating the smoke-filled air in strobing, jagged bursts of yellow light. Sparks rained down like lethal fireworks. Nathan Ellison did not panic. He operated in a realm of absolute clinical focus. The sensory overload that crippled the men on the ground was his natural element. Before the echo of the initial blast had even begun to fade, he was already moving through the shadows like a terrifying, localized force of nature. He slipped behind the first bodyguard just as the man's weapon clicked empty. With a precise, devastating strike to the brachial plexus, the network of nerves running through the shoulder, Nathan rendered the man's right arm entirely useless. As the guard gasped and dropped the weapon, Nathan swept his legs out from under him and drove a knee into the man's spine just hard enough to pin him to the cracked concrete. In less than 3 seconds, heavy-duty tactical zip ties were ratcheted tightly around wrists and ankles. The second bodyguard spun wildly toward the sound of his partner hitting the floor, blindly swinging his rifle. Nathan used the man's own momentum against him, stepping inside the chaotic swing, gripping the searing hot barrel with Kevlar-reinforced gloves, and twisting violently. The weapon was ripped free. A swift, brutal palm strike to the chin sent the guard collapsing backward into a stack of wooden pallets, unconscious before his head hit the ground. Within 10 seconds, the most heavily armed men in the room were neutralized without a single lethal shot being fired. Nathan moved seamlessly toward Morales, who was still violently rubbing watering eyes, trying to crawl blindly toward the safety of his sedan. Nathan grabbed the back of the expensive tailored collar, hauled him effortlessly to his feet, and slammed him against the side of the police SUV. Another set of zip ties secured the drug kingpin to the door handle, leaving him weeping and immobilized in the driving rain that poured through the open loading dock doors. Meanwhile, Sheriff Harlan Briggs and his deputies were experiencing a terrifying realization. The lawmen were supposed to be the predators in Pine Hollow. They were accustomed to compliant, terrified citizens who surrendered at the mere sight of a tin badge. Tonight, they were the hunted. "Travis! Mason! Form up!" Briggs bellowed, voice cracking with a mixture of raw bourbon-fueled rage and creeping, icy terror. He unholstered his heavy service pistol, eyes darting frantically through the lingering smoke. "Who is out there? Show yourself! I am the sheriff of this county and I will put a bullet in your skull!" Deputy Travis, trembling so violently he could barely hold his flashlight, backed toward the rusted fire exit. "Sheriff, my radio is dead. There's no signal. We need to get out of here." "Hold your ground, you coward!" Briggs roared, leveling his pistol at the darkness. From the pitch-black shadows near the catwalk stairs, a voice drifted through the damp air. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, terrifyingly calm rumble that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, cutting through the sound of torrential rain pounding against the tin roof. "You like putting your hands on people who can't fight back, Harlan. Let's see how you do against someone who can." Travis broke. The terrified deputy dropped his flashlight, spun on his heels, and sprinted blindly toward the fire exit. He didn't make it 5 yards. Nathan emerged from the darkness like a phantom, moving with frightening speed. He intercepted Travis mid-sprint, locking an arm around the deputy's throat in a textbook carotid sleeper hold. Travis thrashed wildly for exactly 5 seconds before restricted blood flow to the brain caused his eyes to roll back. Nathan lowered the unconscious deputy gently to the ground and secured his wrists. "Mason, shoot him! Shoot him!" Briggs screamed, pointing into the gloom. Mason raised his weapon, finger trembling on the trigger. Before he could fire, a heavy steel crowbar hurled from the darkness with astonishing precision struck his wrist. The bone snapped with a sickening crack. Mason shrieked, dropped his gun, and clutched his mangled arm, falling to his knees in the puddles of muddy water accumulating on the warehouse floor. Briggs was now completely alone. The grand, untouchable sheriff of Pine Hollow stood surrounded by the neutralized bodies of his men and his criminal associates. The warehouse was silent save for the drumming rain, the groaning wind, and Briggs's own ragged, panicked breathing. He backed slowly against the steel bumper of his police SUV, pale blue eyes wide with unadulterated fear. He gripped his pistol with both hands, aiming it frantically at every shifting shadow. "Who are you?" Briggs demanded, voice trembling uncontrollably. His bloated ego was gone, replaced by the primal terror of a cornered animal realizing it had stumbled into the den of an apex predator. "What do you want? I have money." "The cash is right there in the bags. Take it. Take all of it." Footsteps echoed on the concrete, slow, deliberate, heavy. Nathan stepped out of the shadows and into the dim yellow glow of the SUV's headlights. He had pulled the balaclava off his head. His face was a mask of cold, calculated fury. He looked directly into the terrified eyes of the man who had brutalized his mother. Briggs's breath hitched. He recognized the intense dark eyes and the familiar bone structure. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest. Mason had been right. The kid from the diner, Clara's son, the Navy SEAL, standing right in front of him. "This isn't about money, Harlan," Nathan said softly, closing the distance with slow, terrifyingly measured steps. "This is about accountability." "Stay back!" Briggs screamed, finger whitening on the trigger of his service weapon. "I swear to God, Ellison, I will end your life right here. You're assaulting an officer. You're a dead man." Nathan didn't stop walking. He didn't flinch. His gaze remained locked on Briggs's trembling hands. "You aren't an officer, Harlan. You're a thug wearing a costume. And right now your hands are shaking too badly to hit a target at 5 paces. Briggs let out a guttural yell and pulled the trigger. Click. His eyes widened in sheer horror. He pulled the trigger again. Click, click, click. Nathan stopped 3 feet away, expression unchanged. "When I dropped from the catwalk behind you, I ejected the magazine from your pistol and cleared the chamber," he stated calmly, tossing the fully loaded magazine onto the wet concrete between them. It clattered loudly, sealing Briggs's fate. "You were too busy screaming at Travis to even notice. You lack situational awareness. You lack discipline. You lack honor." Briggs threw the useless empty gun at Nathan's head and lunged forward, throwing a wild, desperate haymaker fueled by pure survival instinct. He was a massive man, over 250 pounds, accustomed to easily overpowering the citizens of his town. But Nathan was not a civilian. He stepped smoothly inside the wide, clumsy arc of Briggs's punch. With surgical precision, Nathan drove the palm of his hand fiercely into Briggs's sternum, forcing the air from the sheriff's lungs in a violent rush. As Briggs doubled over gasping, Nathan seized the heavy leather duty belt, lifted the massive sheriff entirely off his feet, and slammed him mercilessly against the hood of the police cruiser. The heavy steel dented beneath the impact. Briggs groaned, tasting blood, trying weakly to push himself up. Nathan grabbed the back of Briggs's neck and pinned his face firmly against the cold, wet metal of the hood. "You slapped a 72-year-old woman," Nathan whispered, leaning in close so his voice was the only thing Briggs could hear. "A woman who spent her life teaching children in this county. You struck my mother. You thought there would be no consequences because you hid behind a badge. But out in the dark, Harlan, badges don't matter. Only monsters matter, and you just invited one into your home." Nathan swiftly secured Briggs's wrists behind his back with the thickest zip ties in his arsenal, pulling them tight enough to bite deep into the corrupt sheriff's skin. He yanked Briggs up from the hood and shoved him forcefully onto his knees in the center of the warehouse floor, directly beside the open crates of methamphetamine and illegal rifles. "It's over," Nathan stated, stepping back. "You can't do this," Briggs spat, blood dripping from his nose. "I run this county, the judges, the commissioners. They work for me. You think some pictures of some drugs are going to lock me away? They'll throw the evidence out. They'll say you planted it. You're nothing but a rogue soldier, Ellison. I'll make sure you rot in Leavenworth for treason." Nathan reached into his tactical vest, pulled out his encrypted satellite phone, and pressed a single button, deactivating the commercial-grade signal jammer that had isolated the warehouse. "I'm not the one arresting you, Harlan," Nathan replied quietly. Suddenly, the wail of high-pitched sirens pierced the stormy night. They weren't the low, rumbling sirens of local county cruisers. They were the distinct, piercing sounds of federal interceptors. Within seconds, the warehouse was flooded with blinding red and blue strobe lights. 5 armored black SUVs bearing the golden seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, accompanied by heavily armed tactical units from the Department of Justice, smashed through the perimeter gates and surrounded the building. Scores of federal agents poured in, weapons drawn, sweeping the area with laser sights. "FBI, nobody move! Hands in the air!" a voice boomed over a megaphone. Walking calmly through the phalanx of armed agents was Special Agent Cole Brennan, his FBI windbreaker soaked from the rain. He surveyed the chaotic scene, the unconscious bodyguards, the weeping drug distributor, the illegal weapons, the crates of narcotics, and the terrifying figure of a corrupt Sheriff Harlan Briggs, kneeling bound in the center of it all. Brennan looked up at the catwalk, noticing the high-definition cameras Nathan had strategically mounted hours earlier. Every second of the illegal transaction and the ensuing takedown had been securely live-streamed directly to a secure DOJ server in Washington. There would be no corrupt judges dismissing this evidence. There would be no local cover-up. The entire operation was airtight. Brennan locked eyes with Nathan and gave a slow, respectful nod. Nathan had kept his word. He hadn't broken the law. He had simply gift-wrapped a massive federal indictment and served it on a silver platter. Briggs looked up at the swarm of federal agents, the color completely draining from his face as the devastating reality crashed down upon him. His empire was entirely obliterated. His power was gone. He wasn't going to a comfortable county jail where he controlled the guards. He was heading to USP Atlanta, a maximum security federal penitentiary, facing decades of hard time for racketeering, drug trafficking, and civil rights violations. As 2 federal agents hauled the disgraced, sobbing sheriff to his feet and began reading him his Miranda rights, Briggs desperately sought out Nathan's face in the crowd. But Nathan was already gone. He had slipped quietly out the back fire escape, melting effortlessly back into the stormy night. The following morning, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating a Pine Hollow that felt fundamentally different. The heavy, suffocating blanket of fear that had choked the town for over a decade had lifted. News of the midnight federal raid spread like wildfire. Townspeople gathered at the Copper Kettle, speaking openly, laughing freely, breathing the sweet, unpolluted Georgia air for the first time in years. Back at the small white clapboard house at the edge of town, Nathan sat at the kitchen table, gently applying a fresh ice pack to his mother's bruised face. Clara looked up at her son, eyes shining with immense pride and profound relief. "Are you in trouble, Nathan?" she asked softly. Nathan smiled, a genuine warm expression that erased the cold warrior of the previous night. "No, Mom. The FBI handled everything. Pine Hollow is safe now. You are safe." He poured them both a fresh cup of black coffee. Steam rose in the quiet kitchen. The monster had been vanquished. The town had been liberated, and the son had fulfilled his ultimate duty. Justice had finally come to Pine Hollow, not delivered by the corrupted hands of local law, but guided by the silent, unyielding, protective force of a Navy SEAL.